When my parents hired an unauthorized locksmith to drill out the front deadbolt of my $2 million oceanfront villa, they genuinely believed they had pulled off the ultimate property takeover. My mother was standing on my grand stone porch, holding a forged lease agreement and casually sipping coffee, while my father directed a moving crew to unload their heavy antique furniture into my foyer. For 28 years, they had treated my existence like a background shadow, a low-maintenance, invisible daughter who existed only to absorb their neglect while they funded my brother's reckless lifestyle. But as the heavy oak door finally gave way, their victorious smirks completely vanished. They weren't stepping into an empty, defenseless mansion ready to be claimed. Standing in the foyer under the warm recessed lighting were two uniformed police officers, my corporate real estate attorney, and a live security camera feed broadcasting every single second of their break-in directly to the county sheriff's department. My mother's face turned completely pale, her hand shaking so violently that her coffee spilled across my marble floor. Before we dive into how I completely dismantled their illegal entitlement and turned their hostel's takeover into their absolute downfall, follow my story until the end and comment the city or country you are watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My parents acted like I was an absolute shadow in my own home, a background character who existed only to serve the court of their golden child. My name is Clara Vance, and at 28 years old, I finally learned that blood doesn't guarantee love. It just guarantees proximity. For as long as I can remember, our household operated under a strict, unwritten rule. My older brother, Julian, was the brilliant prodigy who could commit no sin, while I was the low-maintenance, invisible daughter expected to stay quiet and fix everyone else's mess. If Julian wanted the newest laptop or a fresh car after crashing his previous one, my parents immediately drained their savings to buy him a luxury sedan, blaming the bad weather or traffic lights for his mistakes. Meanwhile, my achievements were treated like routine chores. When I earned a full academic scholarship to study finance and corporate auditing, my mother offered a distracted nod before reminding me to do Julian's laundry and set the dinner table. I spent decades swallowing the emotional neglect, foolishly believing that if I just worked harder, stayed quieter, and achieved more, my parents would eventually look at me with that same proud warmth they reserved exclusively for him. While Julian spent his 20s floating from one failed business venture to another, funded entirely by our parents' retirement fund, I put my head down and entered the corporate world. I became a senior risk auditor for a major international firm, working grueling 80-hour weeks, cutting out expensive vacations, and quietly saving every single dollar I earned. I managed my money with clinical precision, quietly building a massive private investment portfolio. But whenever I tried to share my professional milestones at Sunday dinners, my father would wave his hand dismissively, calling my high-paying auditor role glorified bookkeeping before pivoting the conversation right back to Julian's latest chaotic plans. The turning point that permanently broke my heart arrived 6 months ago. My parents invited me over for what I foolishly thought was a family dinner to celebrate my major corporate promotion. Instead, the moment I sat down, my father didn't even ask how my week went. He casually announced that he and my mother had just finalized the sale of our childhood suburban home. They were liquidating their entire life's equity to hand Julian $250,000 in cash for his third unverified tech startup. When I gently pointed out that Julian had already lost their savings twice before, my mother slammed her glass onto the table, her eyes flashing with pure fury. She accused me of being a bitter, jealous sister who wanted to watch her brother fail. That night, standing on their front porch while they toasted Julian's future with expensive champagne, something inside me permanently snapped. The eager-to-please daughter, who had spent 28 years begging for crumbs of affection, died right there on those concrete steps. I realized with absolute, crystalline clarity that you cannot force people to value you, and I was entirely done trying. I decided to stop seeking their validation and focus entirely on protecting my own future. They wanted to treat me like an invisible, disposable ghost? Fine. They were about to learn that when the invisible pillar finally walks away, the entire house collapses. With my heart hardened against their constant disrespect, I turned my complete focus toward my own life and healing. Years of 80-hour work weeks and relentless stress had taken a severe physical toll on me, and I desperately needed a space that was truly mine, a sanctuary where the toxicity of my past couldn't reach me. Quietly, without telling a single soul in my family, I began searching for my dream home. After weeks of private viewings with my real estate attorney, Mr. Vance, I found it magnificent. $2 million oceanfront villa situated high on a coastal cliff. The property was a masterpiece of stone, glass, and sprawling ocean views, complete with a private driveway, a high-end master suite, and an expansive terrace overlooking the crashing waves. I didn't take out a high-risk mortgage or ask for a dime of assistance. Using the corporate profits from my private investment portfolio and the savings from my auditing career, I bought the entire villa outright. Holding the certified land deed stamped strictly with my name was the single most empowering moment of my life. For the first time, I felt complete peace. I spent my evenings sitting on my new porch, listening to the soothing ocean breeze, convinced that putting distance between myself and my family had finally given me the clean break I deserved. That quiet peace lasted exactly 3 weeks. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, while I was reviewing financial reports in my new living room, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. The caller ID displayed my mother's name. A strange, heavy knot instantly tied itself in my stomach. I hesitated before answering, wondering why the woman who hadn't called to check on my promotion in months was suddenly reaching out. The second I pressed accept, my mother didn't say hello or ask how I was doing. Her voice carried an arrogant, demanding tone that immediately cut through the quiet air of my home. "Clara, we need to talk," she launched in sharply, not waiting for my response. Julian's tech startup just completely collapsed. The investor backed out, and he lost every single dollar of the house sale money. The bank is foreclosing on his apartment, and your father and I had to sell our remaining assets just to cover his emergency debts. I sat frozen, listening to the predictable disaster, but before I could utter a word, my mother casually dropped a sentence that made my blood run cold. "So, change of plans. Your father and I saw the public property record update online. We know you bought that big oceanfront house. We've already packed up our bags and hired a moving truck. We're moving into your villa starting Monday." The sheer, unadulterated entitlement left me momentarily speechless. Before I could process her words, my father's voice boomed over the speakerphone, thick with smug authority. "We are your parents, Clara," he barked, laying down non-negotiable decrees. "We raised you, and as your family, we have an automatic legal and moral right to enjoy that property. You don't need all those bedrooms for yourself. We'll be taking the main ocean view master suite, and Julian will be moving into the secondary wing. You can pack up your personal things and move down into the basement guest room. If you don't like it, you can find somewhere else to live." My father's words hung in the air like a heavy, toxic fog. They actually believed that because they brought me into this world, my hard-earned sanctuary was a collective family asset they could just seize at will. They expected me to fall back into my old role, the quiet, submissive daughter who would swallow her pride, surrender her home, and quietly retreat to a basement while my enabling parents and lazy brother lived in luxury upstairs. "No," I said softly, my voice completely steady. "What did you just say to me?" my mother screeched through the speaker. "I said no," I replied, feeling a cold, unyielding wave of clarity wash over me. "This villa was bought exclusively with my money, registered solely under my name, and none of you are ever stepping foot inside. Do not come here." Before my father could explode into another furious rant, I hung up the phone and blocked their numbers for the rest of the evening. I knew my family. I knew their arrogant entitlement made them completely blind to boundaries. They didn't think I was serious. They thought I was just having a bitter emotional outburst that could be ignored. So, instead of sitting around waiting for the inevitable storm, I immediately called my real estate attorney, Mr. Vance. Mr. Vance listened to the recorded phone call, confirmed my absolute 100% sole ownership of the land deed, and helped me prep the ultimate defensive strategy. Over the next 48 hours, I transformed my oceanfront villa into an impenetrable high-tech fortress. I had a local security company install high-definition, cloud-connected smart cameras at every entrance, complete with live audio feeds wired directly to my phone, and a local emergency dispatch alert system. On Monday morning, I deliberately left the villa to finalize corporate documents at Mr. Vance's downtown office, leaving the property entirely empty. At precisely 10:15 a.m., my phone began vibrating frantically in my lap. My security app sent a series of high-priority motion alerts. I tapped the screen and opened the live video feed. There, parked right in my circular driveway, was a massive yellow moving truck alongside my father's sedan. I watched in absolute disbelief as my mother stepped out of the car, carrying a travel mug and wearing an insufferable air of triumph. Julian stood by the trunk, looking around the sprawling grounds with a greedy, possessive smirk. But my father didn't even attempt to ring the doorbell. Standing right next to him on my grand stone porch was a local locksmith holding a heavy-duty power drill. My mother pulled a folded piece of paper from her designer handbag, a completely fake, self-drafted family tenancy lease, and handed it to the confused locksmith, claiming they were the rightful property managers who had accidentally locked themselves out. Through my camera's live audio feed, I heard my father bark, "Just drill out the deadbolt, son. We own this place, and my ungrateful daughter is just throwing a tantrum. We'll pay you double." I watched as the locksmith raised his drill to my custom smart lock. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. My parents had just crossed a legal line from toxic family drama straight into criminal felony territory. I didn't speed home screaming. Instead, I calmly tapped my screen, patched Mr. Vance into the line, and initiated an emergency call directly to the county sheriff's department. The trap was officially set. The heavy hum of my car engine felt surreal as I followed the two marked police cruisers down the winding coastal highway toward my villa. Sitting in the passenger seat next to me, Mr. Vance held a sleek leather folder containing the certified county land deeds. We pulled into the circular driveway with zero sirens, but maximum authority. The scene unfolding on my property was a masterpiece of sheer, unadulterated audacity. The locksmith was gone, having successfully drilled out my custom deadbolt, and the heavy oak front doors were propped wide open. My parents had wasted absolutely no time. Stepping out of the car, flanked by two uniformed county sheriff's deputies and my attorney, I walked quietly toward the entrance. Through the open doorway, I could hear my father barking orders, directing two exhausted movers to carry a massive antique armoire up the curved staircase toward my ocean view master suite. My mother was standing in the center of my marble foyer, holding a clipboard like she was the queen inspecting her newly conquered castle. Julian was already sprawled out on my expensive living room sofa, scrolling through his phone with his dirty shoes resting casually on my glass coffee table. As my heels clicked sharply against the marble floor, my mother looked up. For a split second, a smug, victorious grin stretched across her face, completely assuming I had rushed home to cry and surrender. But the moment her eyes shifted past my shoulder and landed on the two armed police officers stepping into her peripheral vision, her confident smile evaporated into absolute terror. The clipboard slipped right out of her trembling hands, clattering violently against the polished stone floor. "What is the meaning of this, Clara?" my father roared, marching down the stairs with his face flushed to dangerous, angry red. He bypassed me entirely, turning his aggressive posture toward the officers. "Officers, there has been a misunderstanding. This is a private family matter. We are the legal tenants of this property, and my ungrateful daughter is just throwing a temper tantrum. We have a signed lease agreement right here." My mother frantically scrambled to pick up the forged piece of paper, her hands shaking as she tried to shove it toward the lead deputy. The officer didn't even glance at it. Instead, he stepped aside, allowing Mr. Vance to step directly into the center of the foyer. "That document is a fraudulent forgery, and presenting it to law enforcement is a felony," Mr. Vance stated, his voice echoing off the high ceilings with cold, surgical precision. He opened his leather folder and presented the officially stamped, certified county land title directly to the officers. "This property belongs entirely and exclusively to my client, Clara Vance. There are no tenants, no cosigners, and no secondary rights." You have illegally drilled through a secured lock, destroyed private property, and initiated an unlawful entry. My father's face drained of all color. He opened his mouth to shout another arrogant command, but the words completely died in his throat. Julian bolted upright from the sofa, the smug entitlement instantly replaced by sheer panic as the officers placed their hands firmly on their duty belts. "Listen to me very carefully," the lead deputy instructed, his tone completely uncompromising. "You have exactly 10 minutes to instruct these movers to reload your truck and step off this property. If you are still standing in this foyer in 11 minutes, all three of you will be leaving in handcuffs for criminal breaking and entering." The entire neighborhood watched in silence as their perfect illusion shattered forever. The utter humiliation on my parents' faces as the moving crew hastily reloaded their furniture back into the truck was a sight I will never forget. They looked smaller than they ever had in my entire life, stripped completely of the arrogant entitlement they had weaponized against me for decades. My father tried to offer one final, desperate glare as the sheriff escorted them past the circular driveway, but he couldn't even meet my eyes. They had walked onto my property convinced they could steal my sanctuary, and they walked out as public embarrassments, forced to find a cheap, cramped motel room just to sleep through the night. The fallout from that single morning unfolded with brutal, relentless speed. Desperate to save face and regain control over me, my mother tried to launch a tearful, manipulative smear campaign online. She posted frantic messages in our extended family group chats and on social media, weeping corporate-quality tears, claiming that her heartless, greedy daughter had called the police on her own flesh and blood and left her elderly parents homeless on the street. She expected the aunts, uncles, and family friends to rush to her side and shame me into submission. She completely forgot that I audit risk for a living and never leave a loop open. Instead of engaging in a screaming match, I simply uploaded the unedited, crystal-clear smart camera footage directly to the family group chat and posted it online. The raw video showed my father double-paying a locksmith to drill out my deadbolt, my mother brandishing a fraudulent lease, and Julian relaxing on my furniture before the police arrived. The public reversal was instant and total. The relatives who had spent years enabling my parents fell into dead silence, disgusted by the sheer criminality of their actions. Without my money to serve as an endless safety net, my family's fragile house of cards completely collapsed. Julian was forced to take a grueling entry-level job to slowly pay back his mountain of personal debts, finally learning the harsh lesson of accountability that our parents had shielded him from his whole life. My parents had to sell off their remaining personal assets to cover the massive legal fees, property damage bills, and the cost of the locksmith they had illegally hired. They were forced into a small, modest rental on the edge of town, facing the bitter reality of the enabling dynamic they had nurtured for 28 years. Today, as I sit on my expansive oceanfront terrace watching the sunset over the crashing waves, a profound sense of peace washes over me. The locks have been replaced with advanced biometric security, and the silence in my life is no longer heavy with grief or quiet desperation. It is light, empowering, and completely free. Standing up to them didn't just protect my $2 million villa. It gave me the unshakable strength to realize that my worth is not defined by people who only valued me when they needed something to take. Now, I'm curious about all of you who have followed my story until the very end. What would you have done if your own family showed up at your front door with a hired locksmith? Would you have pressed full criminal charges? Or would you have walked away cleanly like I did? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to mention the city or country you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.